Good afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on wherever you're joining us from. My name is James. I'm growth lead at Bujeti, and today's webinar we're having it with a partner, Sidebrief. They're a company that does business registration and compliance management. We also have a couple of other guests where today we're going to be talking about how to set up a business entity in Nigeria. And the course of the conversations today I'm going to be having with this very experienced people on the panel are going to help us to understand and basically implement the facts and the points that we're going to take out of today's event. So before we move in, just a few housekeeping notes to inform you of if you're joining us and maybe you're not very familiar with the Zoho platform. This webinar has already been recorded, so just asking for permission just in case. And the recording and the slides are going to be made available on our social media, basically on YouTube, for those that missed the event. And if you want a replay of everything that's kind of been discussed here today, if you also have questions, there is a Q&A segment that you will find if you're joining on your phone or you're joining on your laptop or your PC, right? You're going to find the Q&A segments there where you can ask questions, and those questions will be answered by either myself or anyone else within our guest panel. And we also have like polls that we're going to be running, within the events, just to get a gauge of what our audience, you yourself that are joining us today are doing, and what you want to take out of today's event. And if you have any questions in the course of the conversations we're having today, please send them into the Q&A box, and basically we're going to be able to attend to them. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is the agenda for today. We're going to be starting very quickly into how to set up a business entity in Nigeria, and we dive straight into the panel discussion with our very distinguished guest. I'm going to do a proper introduction anyway. And we're going to talk a bit about what next from everything else we discussed today with Bujeti and Sidebrief. And we'll have a Q&A shortly after. We intend to make this as straight to the point as possible. Right. So the speakers we have today, aside from myself, I've already introduced myself. I'm not very important. We have from Sidebrief, the head of compliance operations, Gbubemi Olaitan. She can also, speak more about what she does at Sidebrief when we move forward. We're also having Tolulope Oguntade, who is a senior associate at Tope Adebayo LP, and we have Samy Chiba from Bujeti. He's the chief operations officer, and all of that good stuff, right? So we should move into why we're actually here today, and what we're doing. So I mean, quick any notes or introductions from our panelists. Maybe Gbubemi, you'd like to go first?
Yeah, thanks. Mic check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Gbubemi. I don't think there's any need to introduce myself in such in-depth way, but I do what I do is I help businesses set up in Nigeria and in other African countries, in Delaware, in the UK. That's really a summary that is relevant to this our webinar today, and I'm glad to be here on this panel.
Great, we're glad to have you too. Tolulope, do you want to go?
Yes, please. Hello, everyone. My name is Tolulope Oguntade, and I'm one of the leads in the innovation and technology practice group of Tope Adebayo LP. And what we basically do is partner with startups and tech companies in providing their legal needs, their legal services. It spans across quite a lot of things, from funding to transaction to projects to general advisory. So basically, legal support services to tech and startups.
Interesting. No, we're also very glad to have you. Samy.
Hello, James. Thank you very much for the introduction. So yeah, I'm Samy Chiba, CEO at Bujeti. I've created a startup in Nigeria, so I have some experience in that kind of things. And at Bujeti, we also help companies in their financial compliance. So it's also something that it will be interesting to discuss today.
Interesting. Thank you all very much. So just set the tone for why we are having this conversation today. I mean, these are some of the words of Samy. That businesses face a couple of risks. You know, if you're running a business anywhere, you know, not just in Nigeria, in Africa, wherever in the world, there are like maybe 3 major risks that your business will face, right? And one of them is in terms of liquidity. I think we kind of covered that in our last webinar. You know, we talked about how you know, financial management and how it's important for your business and what you need to do, especially in this very challenging climate where we have, you know, very fluctuating FX, you know, and it's impacting a lot of businesses, especially if you operate in Nigeria and you're earning, you know, in Naira, right? You know, there's also the compliance risk, which is really a very big risk. If you're not able to, you know, comply with the rules and regulation of the country, or, you know, the place where you've established your business, or the multiple countries that you've probably established your business, you know, you have to follow the rules. You know, there's this saying of when you're in Rome, you know, you need to behave like the Romans, and you give Caesar what belongs to Caesar, essentially. So maybe paying your taxes and setting up your business with the right legal frameworks and all of that, so that your business will basically stand. And there's also another risk that comes with, you know, performance and scaling. But, you know, you first need to establish your business properly before you now start thinking of how to scale, which is what we want to cover here today, right? So Samy, I'll start with you, right? Because, you know, you're closer to home anyways. So, you know, what's basically do you think are those things that a business needs to put in place to make sure that they're compliant? I know you're not definitely legal experts here, but your opinions will be very valid, since definitely you've run business in Nigeria and you do not necessarily look like a Nigerian person. Right. So what do you think are those things that businesses need to put in place to make sure they are compliant? Just, you know, basic stuff.
Well, I feel like I'm always saying the same thing, but everything is related to people, process, and tools. And it's the same thing for compliance. Wherever you are, in Nigeria, in the US, in the UK, you need to be surrounded by the right people. In terms of compliance is very, very important. So I always say that your banker, your lawyer, and your accountant must be your best friend. For me, when I establish a company somewhere, like that's the first thing I do. I try to identify the right people, so I know that I have the right source of truth, and I can trust people to help me to get an understanding of the compliance framework in the country. The second thing is the process. I think that, like, I'm really a process guy, and I think everything is based on a process. If you include compliance in your processes from scratch, you are safe, you are good to go. So when you build a new process, you need to keep in mind that, okay, what are the rules? What are the consequences if I don't follow the rules, and how I can include these rules into my processes so you are good. Even if you grow, you scale at every stage of your businesses, you will be good in terms of compliance. And then the third point is tools. You need to identify the tools that will help you to automate your processes. And it's the same with compliance. And we have Sidebrief today. You know, now we know that we have the technology. The technology is here to help us to automate and to streamline the way we do compliance. We identify the knowledge and we implement the rules.
Interesting. So people, process, and tools, you need to get those things straight. Okay, yeah. Gbubemi, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Samy. Funny thing is, I've never had to put it in these headings, but he's very spot on it. In terms of people, a lot of startups sometimes, or startup founders sometimes stay in isolation. They need to be able to communicate with even people in the industry as well, people in the market, to be able to get insights from people who have been there, done that, gotten experience. That's also very important, you know, in being compliant, because is the information that you run on. You need to get the information, and you can't get it in isolation. Most times you need to communicate with people to get that information. That's very important for being compliant. Aside from that, spot on in terms of having your processes in place, knowing what to do, when to do. This is also very, very tied to information. And I believe that a lot of startup founders or business owners are not compliant because they don't have the right information. They don't have the right access to information. And sometimes it's not even their fault. For example, in Nigeria, not all information is out there in the open or easy to access. Sometimes they don't know because it's not in the maybe it's not on the public website or something. So even that information sometimes may be difficult to have. But if you have the right processes, if you have the right people, and of course you have the right tools, you will be able to be compliant as a business founder.
That's interesting. What would you say to that, Tolulope? What do you think?
So I think two things I would add, or I would emphasize one thing and then I would add another. It would be periodic risk assessment. Once you have your processes in place, once you have your policies in place, you have your compliance partners from time to time. It's important that you reevaluate that, especially when there are drastic changes in your processes or drastic changes in your policies, rather in your product offerings. You need to actually reassess the compliance processes you have in place, evaluate whether or not with the changes that has occurred within the company, there are additional compliance requirements that would apply, or there are alternative ways you can restructure your compliance processes to ensure efficiency in your compliance. One thing we try to do for most of our clients is we have chats with them from time to time, usually on a biannual basis, to kind of get a grasp as to their product roadmap or their operations objective in the next couple of months. The reason being that regulations is very fluid. It changes it changes very fast, especially for those who operate within specific industries. So it's always important that, from time to time, you reevaluate your compliance processes to ensure that you're in tandem with current realities. I think one thing I would actually reemphasize, and the other speakers have actually done justice to that, would be the need to have compliance partners. At the end of the day, people who are fully in the compliance space would usually have first-hand information as to regulatory changes that are bound to happen or that are anticipated. And so having people who understand your business and have your back can be very helpful in keeping tab of changes that might occur or changes that are occurring in the industry that you operate. Even we as lawyers, when we have our cross-border transactions or we have our cross-border clients, we usually try to maintain partnerships with local lawyers in those jurisdictions, because at the end of the day, they would usually have first-hand information, first-hand context, first-hand perspective as to regulatory changes that occur within their space.
That's quite interesting. So, from the responses, I'd like to bring it closer to home. Are there any specific, regulations at the moment that people need to be aware of, as they're running their businesses? I'm talking about very specifically to Nigeria right now, right? Are there any very specific, business registration or compliance laws or rules that people need to be aware of at this time? Because you guys have stressed the importance of having your legal and compliance partners there with you to guide you and basically help you to scale, and navigate all of this. I'll start with Gbubemi.
Sure, thank you. So the first that I would emphasize is share capital requirement. That's something not so new, but it's something that is quite recent for people that are setting up their business entities in Nigeria. So for example, most founders that have their parent company in tax havens in maybe Mauritius, the Cayman Islands, the Delaware, they are regarded as foreign-owned companies. So because of that, they come under, a particular regulation that imposes a share capital requirements on their company. So even though they are nationals of Nigeria, their companies are foreigners, and their share capital needs to, tally with what foreign companies are expected to have. Now, recently there was the implementation of the 100 million share capital by the CAC, the Corporate Affairs Commission, and so you'd see that a lot of businesses that tried to register their companies afterwards couldn't go with the 10 million. That's very recent. So it used to be 10 million share capital, but now it's 100 million. So a founder who is looking to set up business in Nigeria and has no knowledge whatsoever of this new or recent development is thrown, is shocked. He meets a roadblock, really, if he's not prepared, because there are financial implications for the share capital, in terms of the registration, the cost and the fees and all that. It impacts on their plans and budget and all that stuff. So it's very important. That is a very recent one that I would like to emphasize on. I'll just let the others take the other ones that come up.
Okay, Tolulope.
Yeah, thanks. So for startups, I think I usually like to simplify compliance for startups, because most times when people think of compliance, they think of all these processes, all these requirements that I need to comply with as a company. And so I think I'll break it down into 3 or 4 categories, which is primarily tax, labor. I usually would include data protection under compliance for startups, and requirements that has to do with CAC requirements, like the 100 million share capital requirement that Gbubemi had made mention of. Now for tax, I mean, for every business in Nigeria is required to register for and remit tax, and taxes ranges from company income tax, value-added tax. There's the remittance to ITF, there's a tertiary education tax and co. It seems like quite a lot, but if you have the right processes in place and you have the right people on board, you are able to actually ensure compliance with these things, with these requirements, without too much hassle. Also, if you look at an example would be the compliance requirements that has to do with labor. Now, there are so many ways to actually minimize the exposure you have or your need to comply with certain requirements if you have the right structure in place. So for labor in particular, you're required to remit payee. You are required to maintain and ensure that you give your employees employment agreements within 3 months of you engaging them. You're required to make remittances to the NSITF. Now, what most people would do, people who have spoken to other people or people who have consulted with other people, what they would do would be to maintain a slim fit employee base, such that their early years they're working mostly on contract basis, so that they don't have to remit payee. They don't have to bother about payment or remittance of NSITF until they've gotten to the point where they have a viable product, they are entering the market, and they actually need someone on a full-time basis to run the company. So yes, all these compliance requirements, they seem like a lot, but if you have the right structure in place, you can reduce the compliance requirement, and complying wouldn't really be a burden. Yes, I also mentioned CAC. There's the annual returns you have to file to CAC on once every year. For data protection, the reason why I brought that into this list is because recently the NDPC, that's actually last Friday, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission reduced the threshold for qualification of data processors and controllers of major importance. And what they tried to achieve, which is quite interesting and brilliant of them, what they tried to achieve was to ensure that most people, if not all, who have reason to process personal data would have to register with them and do periodic returns to them. And so as a business entering into Nigeria, especially those in tech, it's almost impossible for you to be in tech and not process personal data. So for those who are just starting off and they actually intend to go into tech or such businesses that would bother on processing of personal information and data, it's very important that you actually pay attention to compliance requirements surrounding data protection in Nigeria.
That's, I mean, personally, that's very insightful. I think from the polls we have here, we have a lot of startups, right? We have a lot of people that are like kind of starting businesses, or they're like in the startup phase of their companies. So mentioning that, you know, you need to be mindful of some major regulations around tax, labor, data, and even, you know, registering your business. So I think I want to focus a bit on, you know, even setting up, registering a business, right, locally. Let's even start with, you know, in Nigeria, right? Well, what should people be mindful of? What are those things you need to get in place? You talk about, you know, a lot of startups have like founder and co-founder. I think if you want to establish best structure, you have like a board of directors, you know, just advisory or something, depending on your stage and your experience as well. So what are those things that, you know, people that want to start businesses should be looking out for when they want to establish their business? Things that they just know, like a checklist they need to get on hand, they need to get on ground before they you know, basically hit the ground running. Gbubemi, you might want to give us something if you're with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so, yeah, there are a couple of things that, you know, every person who is looking to start up a business should have, you know, in place. So I'll break it down into maybe 3 or 4 bits. So there's the documentary requirements in terms of the registration, you know, that is one part. There's the tax consideration. That is another part, and that is very connected to the type of entity that they would be registering. I'll break them into slight bits once I'm done highlighting them. There's the ongoing compliance obligations, maybe on an annual basis, on a monthly basis. Those are not exactly taxes, but they are obligations. So Tolulope had mentioned some examples, such as the NSITF, you know, ITF, pension fund administration, depending on the number of, you know, employees that you have and all that. That is also a very important, you know, consideration for every business that's looking to start. So I'm going to go back now to in terms of the documentary part. Preparing the documents for incorporation, you already should know when you're registering, the government would ask you for your personal details, you know, just to be sure, who are you qualified? Are you a human person? Is it a robot that's trying to register a company? So we'll need your personal information, really. We'll also need to see the type of business you're trying to register, because that's important in terms of we don't want you to go and officially register a fraudulent business. So the business objectives, you need to have that in place. That also very much impacts on, you know, the type of licenses and permits that you would need, if depending on the type of business you're operating. So you need to have that in your checklist to know, okay, this is what I would be doing, and to do this I may need these and these permits. Or if you're not sure, I'll have to consult to find out if I need any permits to do this and that. So that's in terms of the documentary part. There's the share capital, how you want to split your shares between the shareholders, depending on how many they are, depending on the structure that you want to go with. So now, in terms of the structure, you know, there are different types of entities registrable in Nigeria, you know, and you need to decide on the best entity for yourself. If you're going with a limited liability company, if you're going with a sole proprietorship, or you're going with a limited liability partnership, or just like a regular partnership, those are also considerations that you need to have at the point where you're looking to setting up your company. In terms of taxes, then you need to know the type of taxes that will be applicable to the type of entity you registered. For example, if you registered a limited liability company, you need to know the percentage of your company's income tax that you would need to pay payee, remittances, and all those considerations. Tolulope also mentioned stuff about VAT, there's withholding taxes. So you need to become aware of the type of taxes that are generally applicable in Nigeria and the ones that directly apply to your business or your type of entity. And then there's the non-tax, they're not really taxes, but they are like obligations as well. They're similar to, so for example, the annual returns, you know that on an annual basis, you need to file returns with the Corporate Affairs Commission. It's not really a tax, but it's an obligation for you. So you need to also be aware of those compliance obligations that you have on an annual basis. Or you need to file your tax returns, even though you didn't make profit or not, just to show that, oh, we are still a going entity, or, you know, we're still a going concern. That's also something that every business owner who is looking to set up needs to have. It needs to have in place. So once you have your documentary issues sorted out in your checklist, you have your tax issues sorted out, and also ongoing compliance you're pretty much good to go. Then you then begin to think about more around the core structuring of your entity, the core structuring of your business, and that's where you see board of directors coming in. What the composition should be, what are the qualifications that you want to have, you know, advisory board, and on all those kind of structures, internal structuring options. Do you want to have ESOP, that's your employee stock option pool? Do you want to have how many percent would that be? And then you also then now look at agreements. So when we look at agreements, we're looking at agreements between the founders, that's the people who founded the company, the business owners. We also look at employee contracts, the type of contracts, the type of terms that should be in your contract, and how it should be drafted. Those are very important as well. If you need to use third-party technical people in your technology, or you need them to build your tech, you don't want them to be employees, the type of contract you should have, you know, for these guys, you know, and this contracting is another aspect. It's not really core to setting up, but it is very advisable and very important for setting up. I'll just stop here so the other can take that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's like a full-on consulting at the moment. So Tolulope, do you have any additions to what Gbubemi has said?
Yes, I think I'll just add it with Gbubemi has actually done a very good work going through most of the basic documents and things you should actually have at your mind to. Gbubemi had also mentioned the minimum requirement for foreign participation, which reminds me as to for companies that have offshore holdcos and are looking to actually register in Nigeria, some additional compliance requirements or licensing requirement, I would say, that they would require would be getting a business permit from the Ministry of Interior, and also registration with the NIPC. Again, nowadays we see there's been a very high increase in the registration of companies in foreign jurisdictions for so many reasons. But in the event that you have an holdco which is offshore outside Nigeria, and you're looking to set up the Nigerian entity with the holdco holding majority interest or ownership in the Nigerian entity, then additional considerations would include, you know, getting necessary business permits, registration with the NIPC. Also, if you're looking to actually bring in foreign experts or foreign employees, definitely you'd have to consider obtaining expatriate quota and then the monthly returns that applies to it.
Okay, very, very interesting. Notably, you actually mentioned for businesses that have like foreign entities, there's a trend of people starting companies and having preference to register in Delaware, right? So I want to touch briefly on that as to why is that the case? Are there any specific benefits, you know, as to tax, compliance, you know, or whatever it is that makes people want to basically incorporate in Delaware? I know there are definitely a couple of them, but from your experience, you know, Gbubemi and Tolulope, what do you guys think about that?
Tolu, you can go first, if you don't mind, or should I?
No, sure. So I think the four reason why most people will go to other jurisdiction would be tax benefits. I mean, every business is looking for, the best way to keep money in and cut down on expenses or financial obligations. So yes, and I think that's one thing Delaware does pretty well. There's zero taxation on income that is generated by the old co in other jurisdictions. And then another thing would be privacy, and that's one advantage or edge Delaware has over a lot of other countries like Mauritius and co, which are actually registering, which are known as offshore events for old codes across the globe. Now, with the rise of AML-CFT, where people are required to disclose who their ultimate beneficial owners are, you have people or startups with venture capitalist funding or fund managers who have fund managers on their cap table reluctant to go to such other jurisdictions because now their fund managers or their VCs asked to disclose who their limited partners are, which is usually something that is very very confidential and details of which are not usually willing to share in public. And so the reason why Delaware also tops the chart is because it's much easier to actually set up a company in Delaware, and you don't necessarily have to disclose ultimate beneficial owners. You don't need to provide information as to who your LPs are, who your fund managers are. And so it affords companies and shareholders privacy that a lot of these big fund managers really, really want. So yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
Okay, interesting. Gbubemi, you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tolu. Thanks for explaining why a lot of people are running there. Number one, of course, the money, the taxes, and all that. That's also something that that Delaware is really good at for a lot of founders. I would just like to add a few more points that make Delaware like the go-to jurisdiction for a lot of founding businesses. So we're looking at things around the clarity of the laws. The Delaware, general corporation law is very clear. It's very specific in terms of what is expected of a corporation or a limited liability company or a partnership. It's very easy interpretation. So a lot of people feel like, oh, you already know what applies to your company. Just there's no ambiguity really, and that's one of the perks of registering in Delaware. Another very important thing that a lot of people are not even aware of, a lot of people who are already even incorporated in Delaware are not aware of, is the flexible corporate structure that Delaware offers. Now, for most jurisdictions, when you incorporate there, if you make changes internally, maybe you remove a director, you make changes to a shareholder, you restructure your shareholding, you need to file that in the company's house, or for example in Nigeria, in the Corporate Affairs Commission. But that's not the case with Delaware. All this internal restructuring that you're going to do inside is really not their business. All you need to do is file your annual report every year and just put what the current situation is. They don't expect you to make any filing to them. So that saves a lot of business owners a lot of headache, honestly. They just need to sort out the documentations internally and they are good to go. It makes it also, that's also a perk of incorporating in Delaware. There's also credibility, of course, and prestige, A lot of investors that invest in founding company startups, they have confidence in the Delaware jurisdiction. They have been there. They've had experiences there, they have confidence in it, and because of that, they are looking to invest in businesses that are incorporated there. That makes a lot of startups who are already incorporated there a good, investing option for a lot of these investors. I think that's about it, in addition to what Tolu had said. Oh, and I'd also like to mention that there's a new provision for beneficial owners, Tolu. I think something around reporting of who the ultimate beneficial owners are. So I'm not sure how this plays out because it's a new regulation and it's just being implemented in January this year, where you need to, even though you are incorporated, you need to say who the beneficial owners are. This was not the case in Delaware initially, but currently now you need to mention who the beneficial owners are. And I'm not sure how this would impact the jurisdiction or how this will impact on Delaware being the go-to, jurisdiction for a lot of businesses that are or startups. But we're just watching to see what will become, or if this will still, if this will still be a perk for people who are looking to incorporate in Delaware. Yeah.
Very, very interesting takes here. We've pushed Samy away for a bit to let the professionals speak. But I want to ask something very specifically, and this is coming from what Tolulope said about registering your company and making sure that you have all your documents and everything that you need to make sure that you are on the right side of the law. I think I want to ask something, if it's possible. If you fail at compliance, you can probably go to jail. But that's not even that's not the question. I think that goes without saying. But what I want to ask specifically is for a bit of experience with Bujeti, running Bujeti, you're handling people's information when it comes to like data. There's the side of if you're making payments, there's an implication to tax, and money that moves around different places. There's something that is required legally, and in terms of compliance, that those funds have to follow, right? So Samy, what do you think, for businesses that have like operations in different like countries, for instance, how do you think that affects them, in terms of financial management now? I know, KYC, KYB are very important, especially if you're onboarding a business into like a platform like Bujeti, so that the government does not come down on Bujeti too. So what would you say to that in terms of getting their documentation right? How exactly can they fulfill all of those obligations, especially if they're operating in multiple countries?
A lot of questions in one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first thing is that, as you mentioned, a lot of compliance parts are related to finance. When you talk about tax, when you talk about any remittance, if you want to be able to pay your tax, you need to be able to calculate your tax obligation. So your financial management is very, very, very important. If you're not able to manage and analyze your finances, it will be very hard for you to pay your tax. So that's the first point. And it's also the case for registration. You mentioned KYB, KYC. If you are not well registered from the beginning, how can you be compliant for the rest of your operations? So I've seen a lot of cases where businesses are trying to be compliant. So they come to Bujeti and say, okay, I want to use your platform to manage my finances because I want to raise money or whatever, and I need to have this transparency regarding my finances. I say, okay, come, you're welcome to Bujeti, of course, but you're not registered. How can we do? I cannot give you transparency over something that is not existing legally. Get. So businesses, they need to understand that, of course, you can start making business without being compliant. At the very beginning, that's fine. A lot of people say that, okay, compliance is cumbersome, the process is long, it's very bureaucratic, the legal framework is changing, it's unstable, so it's easier to just go make business and we'll see later. And if we have an issue, we can show some love to an officer and we'll fix the problem. But it's not like that. Sorry, I've seen a lot of cases when people want to be compliant after a few months, few years, and I swear the effort you need to put in place to catch up after a few months is way bigger. And a lot of companies are reaching, how can you say, like selling where you cannot go further, or they just stop doing business because they are not able to put the necessary effort to be compliant. So understanding that compliance start from the beginning is very, very important. And you mentioned the fact that you have some specificities with cross-border operation and all. Yes, it adds complexity, but I feel that it's the same thing everywhere. If you have operation in the US, in the UK, and in Nigeria, you need to be compliant everywhere. There's no way to escape it. So you need to apply, as I said, right people, right process, right tools everywhere you have operations. If you do so, you are safe. And last advice, don't play with compliance. As you said, jail is not an option. If you want to succeed, it will be very hard to run your business from jail.
Interesting. So, I mean, we're in the age of where technology is a big thing now. So, me and my friend cannot just sit down, come up with an idea, start building something in our basement without, and start collecting money basically from customers if we don't set up the right, registration and compliance framework around our business. Right? You cannot do Steve Jobs and Wozniak. They didn't tell us the compliance part though. I'm just saying. Okay, I think that's quite interesting. So yeah, we are in the Q&A section. Anyways, I've asked most of the questions. If you're listening to us now, you have any specific questions you'd like to ask our speakers as we kind of round up, you can drop those questions in the Q&A box, and we will tend to them before we close. So one thing I want to let Gbubemi kind of emphasize is what they do. So we know there's a lot of problems around not getting your compliance right, not getting your legal framework right, your people, your process, your tools, and all the good stuff. And Sidebrief is one business that basically helps to cater to this, and as partners to Bujeti as well. I think that's very key for people that kind of listening to us. Gbubemi, we would like to talk about what you guys help businesses to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So Sidebrief, what we do at Sidebrief, we essentially help you simplify your compliance. This spans all types of compliance, ranging from the very, very beginning, where you incorporate, set up in the countries that you want, down to your annual compliance. So we're looking at things around your tax filings for your entity, your annual returns filings for your company, things around providing you with processing your licenses and your permits for operations. That's essentially what we do for you at Sidebrief. We're trying to automate it as much as we can in such a way that we notify you when an obligation becomes due. If you sign up on our platform, we have your details and all that. We'll let you know if, for example, you are registered in Delaware, how your Delaware taxes are due to be filed, when the deadline is, how much it will take to do it. So you're aware. You can't hide under the cloak of not being aware or being ignorant of what you need to do in terms of your compliance. So what Sidebrief is trying to do for a lot of businesses and startups is to help you simplify compliance, to make it not so difficult and not so mystical or as a lot of founders think that compliance is. So that's what we do at Sidebrief, and we have an app, a web app. You can sign up app.sidebrief.com. You can sign up, create an account there, and then you see essentially what we do. Aside from registering the ongoing cycle of your business as well, things around managing your business, if you need to make changes to maybe the directorship, your shareholders, anywhere that you are incorporated in, Sidebrief is able to help that under our managed product. We also help with licenses, permits, as I said earlier. We help with immigration visas. If you need to, you're incorporated in, for example, in Kenya, you're incorporated in, Cameroon, you need to visit Cameroon, you're not a Nigerian, or you're not, wherever it is that you want to, visit in terms of your visas, permits, and all that, we can help you process that as well. So we have like tailored products. We have the launch product, which helps you launch, register your business. We have Taxculate, TaxPay. It helps you calculate your taxes on an annual basis, lets you know what they would be, and also help you file them. We have your Roam, which is of course our our visa service. And then we have Shield. So Shield has to do with your intellectual property, helping you protect it. So if you need to register your trademark, you need to register your patent, if you need to, your copyright, if you need to register your brand name and all that, we help with that under Shield, because it helps you pretty much protect your brand and protect your name and protect your business. And so that's what we do at Sidebrief, and you can reach out to us just by going on our website, calling any numbers there, sending an email, or just pretty much signing up on the portal, and then we will reach out to you. Thank you, James.
Okay, because I have like one idea like that for like a kind of Uber for cats. So I think I'll be in your DM too. So you
yeah, absolutely. Happy to hear it. Oh, you don't want to know the kind of ideas I've heard.
Okay, very interesting. So look, I think you also have some very useful expertise that people would be interested in maybe reaching out to you. So maybe you want to tell them how they can do that after this event.
Oh yes, thank you. Thank you, James. So yes, we are a full service law firm. One of the core advantages that we have is we provide a vast range of services. We have different core teams from our company secretarial to our transaction advisory to corporate and project finance to corporate structuring and even much more. So I think what we've tried to achieve over the couple of years is forming partnerships with startups. One thing that we understand is the fact that most often than not, people who are starting off their businesses, they tend to see legal as quite a lot, and they often do not have the budget for legal services. They would usually postpone it until the inevitable becomes very urgent. So what we try to do here is, in our partnership with tech companies, in our partnership with startups, we try and simplify legal. We look at the services you're offering, we look at your operations, we look at your core objectives, and we simplify legal so that it's very easy for you to ensure compliance, for you to protect, minimize legal risk, for you to protect your interest in the short and on the long run without accruing unnecessary expenses, and also without affecting your operations. So yes, we do have a customized package for startups, which more or less provides you with the necessary documentations you need. Gbubemi had mentioned quite a number of them at the point of you setting off. There are the template documents, there are the template policies, template contracts, template NDAs, and all that, which you can always fall back to pending the time you can afford to have someone on retainer. And one of the things we also try to do, yes, we understand that most startups might not be able to afford having a full service, a full legal person in-house or at their beck and call. But what we try to do for them is, whenever there are regulatory changes across the different jurisdictions in which our current clients operate, we provide notifications to them. And also, because of the partnerships we've developed over the course of the years with locals across Africa, local lawyers across Africa, it's usually helpful in helping our clients who are looking to expand into other jurisdictions to like get their footing as to key legal considerations they should bear in mind, how it affects their risk exposure in terms of legal, and how they can mitigate it. So I think that kind of sums up what we do here at Tope Adebayo LP.
Very interesting. So I was just wondering where, this Child and Bail lawyers that are very popular right now, the the Lasisi and Lai Wasabi guys, I wonder who they work with. maybe they work with you or something, right? I know a lot of people don't want to talk legal until there's problem. So, but yeah, I think that would be very useful for a lot of people here. So yeah, we did not get any much questions, and I think that's because I've asked all the right questions, or I've it's just been overwhelming. But yeah, very good to take all of this. So I'll just ask if we have any closing notes, starting with Samy. Okay, before I even say closing, I mean, I've been asking questions, I've not kind of answered any, right? So I mean, very very key advice to everyone listening. Once you get your compliance rights, you get your registration rights, you set up your business properly, and you actually want to do operations, right? The side of financial management is also very key, because if you're not able to track what's going in and what is coming out of your business, it's going to crash. Your startup is going to remain a startup, is going to remain small. It's never going to grow. But once you sort out your legal, you come to Bujeti and we help you sort out the remaining ones, right? So we're a shameless plug in that regard. That's for me. So Samy, any closing remarks you have for people here?
Well, last thing is, if you are truly ambitious regarding your business, you must take compliance very seriously. If you want to start, if you want to grow, if you want to scale, compliance is not an option. And compliance is, yes, legal, tax, and finances. So you will need a proper virtual CFO assistant. You will need Bujeti.
All right. So Samy is just reiterating what I said. Okay. Any closing remarks, Gbubemi?
Okay. Your closing remarks are pretty much similar to talking about your company, but I'll just give like a general closing remarks in terms of compliance generally for businesses. It can be a bit tricky for a lot of new business owners, and it can seem a bit overwhelming. However, just sitting down and not doing anything about it makes it even worse. So it is best to get the right information you need in order to, go ahead with your dreams in terms of setting up your own business. So you need to reach out to consultants, you need to reach out to Sidebrief, you need to reach out to, Tope Adebayo LLP on your legals, and you need to reach out to professionals who can guide you. Even if you don't have the money yet, at least you will have the knowledge to know that, oh, this is what I need to do when I do have the money. You're not in the dark. It's very important to be aware of all these obligations that you have when setting up your business, or that you will have before you do set up your business, so that you're not caught unawares by anything when they come up. So that would be my closing remarks. Go for the information, go for it. Don't shy away from getting quotes from us. Don't shy away from getting invoices from Tope Adebayo LLP and co. So yeah, that's of course, and don't shy away from signing up on Bujeti's app or trying to use their software that they have available for maintaining your finances. Thank you so much.
All right, great. I don't know if Tolu has any other things to say before
yes, so I think I'm going to be more or less emphasizing, and what I'll be emphasizing is the fact that legal and compliance is not as cumbersome or as complicated as a lot of people think it is. If you get it right from the beginning, the chances are that you would continue to get it right on a continuing basis. And the saying that a stitch in time saves 9 is very, very applicable and relevant when it comes to compliance, because it will amuse you that there are certain compliance requirements that not only attracts sanctions or penalties, but also attracts, reoccurring interest if you fail to pay them on time, especially taxes. And so it's always important from the get-go to establish your compliance partners, establish your legal partners. You might not be able to have them on a full continuing basis, but you would also be amazed at how flexible and how easy it is to structure something that works for your business at that time, or works for the company and is scalable on the long run. So yes, do not ignore legal, do not ignore compliance, and trust me, one way or another, you'd be surprised that both both aspects, like even finances, like James mentioned, all aspects actually come together and are quite vital. You know, even though at the early stage the focus is usually let's make money, let's push the market to the let's put the product to the market, let's scale, let's enter new markets. But it gets to a particular point, especially when your company starts becoming visible, or when, for example, you are looking to raise funds, your investors come in, and then they want to see the structure you have in place. They want to see the risk they are buying into. They want to see the gaps in your company, you know, as an excuse to reduce your valuation, as an excuse to price you down, right? So all these things are important. If you don't pay attention to it at this time, it can cause even bigger problems in future.
Very interesting, very interesting. So I'd like to thank you guys so much for sharing all of this free knowledge. There's something Samy also said, I quote Samy a lot, that, you know, if you're running a business, you need to have some very good friends, and they need to be like your banker, your lawyer, and your accountant. I will kind of have the lawyer side and the accounting and banking, you know, in this conversation all at the same time. So just make us, make us your friends, and you get a lot of free advice and free stuff, basically, right? So I think at this point we'll call it a close, and you know, I'm thanking the speakers. Thank you, Gbubemi. Thank you, Tolulope, for sharing all of this free advice and free knowledge that I'm going to use for my Uber for cats. Right? And yes, thank you everyone for coming, and you'll be able to reach out to Bujeti, to Sidebrief, and to Tolulope at Tope Adebayo. You know, you'll find them. You'll find them if you have any other follow-up questions for them, right? Okay, yeah, somebody's actually thanking us for putting this together. All right, so I'll take the flowers. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you, James.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
The webinar has ended. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.